With a new Dreamworks animated movie comes a new roster of lovable characters to discuss. From narcissistic beavers to kleptomaniacal raccoons, we're ranking them all from worst to best. This is the Wild Robot character tier list. And we'll kick things off like we usually do with the most unsavory characters. This is the F tier. And weirdly enough, this movie's worst character in our book is one who's never directly shown. Fink's mother. Fink is a complex character. While he clearly distrusts people due to his own lack of friends, he's also cunning and ruthless, willing to use others to his own devices.
Easy, I can teach him the way my mom taught me. Swim!
But in what initially seems like a throwaway joke, the reason for this is pretty much all but directly revealed. When Bright Bill is having a hard time falling asleep during a storm, Fink suggests his mother's old method of rocking him to sleep, which turns out to be literally whacking him unconscious with a rock.
There you go. My mother used to use whiskey whenever I had a toothache. My tooth hurts!
Yeah, it's one of those instances of dark humor that's pretty funny, until you consider the implications. And it makes it even more obvious why Fink is so desperate to stick by Roz's side. Poor guy. And before anyone asks, no, this is not some scientifically accurate depiction of how foxes actually put their babies to sleep. And I can't believe I just googled that. Fink's mom just sucks. While they aren't as bad, we're giving the only other F-tier spot to the geese. I can't say I'm surprised though. I don't trust geese in real life, and I was right not to trust them, with two exceptions in this movie. Bullies in movies are a dime a dozen, but these geese are just a whole new breed of messed up. I guess you could expect them to make fun of Bright Bill for being different or a runt, and that's not good, but it's at least a reason you would expect from bullies. But like, they bully him for the fact that he's being raised by Roz, and for the fact that she killed his whole family. I mean, that's pretty messed up even by bully standards. Hey, nice dead parents, nerd. Come on, boys, let's go drown him. You almost find yourself rooting for Fink to manage to eat one of them. But now let's move on to the characters who at least won't make you root for a homicide to occur in a children's movie. This is the C tier. And kicking off this category is no ordinary entry, it's an entry with a moose. Moosey McGoosey here, I'm like 110% sure he doesn't have a name, is only in like 2 scenes throughout the movie. The first appearance he makes is right at the beginning when, after a baby bunny asks Roz if she's here to kill the local wildlife, proceeds to yeet her across the terrain even after being told no. Like, dude, she didn't even do anything. Still, it wouldn't be right to call him an F-tier character for that, since, like the other animals, he's just scared of Roz because he's never seen a robot before. Plus, when a robot actually is there to kill the local wildlife shows up, he's more than willing to use his kicking for good, so I guess that makes up for a bad first impression. And speaking of poor first impressions, the raccoons are up next. The first thing these guys do is straight up mug Roz for her body parts, presumably for no other reason than because they're shiny and interesting. On one hand, that's an absolutely valid reason. On the other hand, even if it is a valid reason, mugging someone for spare parts isn't cool. Like, imagine if Roz wasn't a robot. These guys have some serious learning to do about boundaries. And what's worse is that if they just kept their grubby paws to themselves, Roz wouldn't have involuntarily killed Bright Bill's family. Speaking of morally questionable species who take a little too much for themselves, closing out the C tier, we have none other than humanity. Man, this feels dystopian. And it probably is, since the only thing we know about humans in the Wild Robot universe so far is that they created Rosms to serve them and to streamline life to its fullest potential. Because, as we all know, nothing can go wrong with relying on technology to fulfill literally every need of humankind, right? Yeah, I'm sure the humans had the best of intentions, but the fact that these robots will attack geese who are just standing there in the human world is definitely showing a more hostile view towards nature than we'd like. Plus, that one lady at the end of the movie totally refused to wave back at Roz. Truly, she was the real villain all along. Now we move on to the characters we don't really have any grievances with. With so many cute, cuddly, sometimes cybernetic characters, this is the B tier. First up in this category is Bright Bill's mostly off-screen flight instructor, Thunderbolt. For being one of the only birds who treats Bright Bill and Roz with any semblance of respect, Thunderbolt is pretty great right off the bat. This falcon doesn't hesitate to help Bright Bill accept his status as a runt, and more importantly, that said status doesn't prevent him from flying. He's a pretty cool character, which is why it's a shame that he only has like a minute of screen time. but sometimes you don't necessarily need a lot of screen time to shine. Take the otters, for instance. As the first life forms Roz sees waking up on the island, these adorable creatures give us an up-close and personal look at the absolutely stunning environment Dreamworks cooked up for this movie. Seriously, not only are these guys cutesy and heavily detailed, but they even start tinkering with Roz before she wakes up, only to frighteningly run away when those lights come on. It's simple stuff, sure, but that doesn't take away from how good of an introduction these little guys help to give for the world. From one cute entry to another, next up is the baby bunny. Like the moose earlier, this little guy only really shows up during a couple scenes, and he fulfills one crucial purpose: to ask whether or not Roz is here to kill him and his family. He's also able to understand Roz right away for some inexplicable reason, which is pretty cool. It's a shame nobody listened to his report that Roz was not, in fact, there to kill them, even if, to be fair, it wasn't the most polite way to introduce himself. Closing out this category, we have Rummage. I don't think there's enough emphasis on just how chill Rummage was. This robot was effectively dead for presumably years, and upon being woken up from an indefinite coma, was fully okay with teaching fellow robot Roz about her origins, not to mention offering a listening ear for her woes. When she suspects that Roz is defective, she gives Roz her own retrieval flare so she can get fixed. Even though between the two of them, I think Rummage probably needs much more urgent repairs. Is Rummage just extremely generous? Or was she just done living at that point? Any way you slice it, she's pretty cool, just not quite enough to place her in our penultimate category. We're reaching the movie's MVPs now. Next up, we have the A-tier characters. And first up in this category, we have local mother of 7, Pinktail. As apathetic as she seems at this point in her life, Pinktail is still pretty great. For starters, she's technically the whole reason Roz was able to overcome her own programming.
Oh, okay. Wow. Hello. This gosling is yours. Negative.
Since she's the one who gave her the task to raise Brightbill and make him her top priority.
Taking care of him is your task now. Task acquired.
As exhausted as Pinktail is, and understandably so, she still prioritizes the care of those who can't take care of themselves, which is a pretty respectable conviction to have. Of course, there is the fact that she wasn't moved at all by thinking one of her children straight up died right behind her.
As a mother of 7. 6 babies. It's a full-time thing.
Which, while it's played for laughs, is kind of messed up. Then again, she was equally unbothered when she thought she herself was about to get killed by Roz, so maybe this is just some kind of weird, nihilistic opossum shtick. In any case, following her are her 6 children, Pinktail's kids. Known for their dedication to the art of playing dead and their tendency to say some very Lumily-esque stuff, these kids fill the kinda cute, kinda creepy archetype that animated movies have been running with a lot lately.
Let's go see! Is he gonna drown or get the hypothermia?
They're here enough to make you laugh, but not there so long that you end up disliking them, which is a tough balance for a lot of movies to get, so good on them. The most fearsome and fearless forest animal, the bear, is up next. This guy might initially seem like he's shaping up to at least be a secondary antagonist. The animals are just as scared of him as they are of Roz, if not more so. And given his short temper and immense strength, it's not hard to see why. But when a snowstorm forces all of the animals under the same roof, the bear is one of the first animals who agrees to an interspecies truce, which leads to him becoming friends with the other animals, even the generally unpopular Fink. And he's also voiced by Mark Hamill, which, come on, that voice at least merits an A-tier spot. And just outside the S tier and the top 5 is the movie's main antagonist, Vantra. Vantra is the outwardly friendly, inwardly ferocious robot who's ordered to retrieve Roz from the forest. While a pure evil villain can be fun and a sympathetic evil one can be interesting, sometimes the coolest decision you can make is doing one who's neither. Vantra is just doing her job and doesn't have any malicious intent beyond capturing Roz and her sweet, sweet memories, which, again, is just what she's straight up built to do. What boosts her up so high is not just the sheer mystery behind her motives, but also the absolute terror she inflicts. Vantra literally causes a gigantic forest fire by blowing up her own robot soldiers, making her not only a terrifying threat, but responsible for one of the most visually stunning sequences in Dreamworks animation history. All in all, she's a pretty decent antagonist, and hopefully she survived that magnetic crushing she took at the end of the movie, or at least another copy of her did. But with the top 5 upon us, it's time to talk about the S-tier wild robot characters, who will be the reason Dreamworks fans are going to remember this movie for years to come. One of the movie's comic relief characters, Paddler, is at number 5. This is a prime example of one of those side characters who gets a bigger role than you would think, and man, am I glad for that. While he initially seems like an arrogant artist with a planet-sized ego, Paddler turns out to be way cooler than you might think. When Roz loses her leg helping Brightbill learn to fly, Paddler builds her a new one, and one that's durable enough to last for pretty much the whole remainder of the movie. On top of that, he has a fun vocal performance by Matt Berry, which was one of the best in the movie.
Are you dying? Do everyone a favor and expire downstream.
He's one of those guys who's just way nicer than anyone will admit, including himself. Just outside of the top 3 is the legendary Longneck. Longneck is the only goose who even tries to be civil with Brightbill and Roz, seeing great potential in the young bird. Longneck not only invites Brightbill to come along with him in his own migration formation, but when trouble arises, he helps rally the other birds to follow Brightbill to safety. He not only ensures that Brightbill will fit in well with his own kind, but he was willing to sacrifice his life to make sure they'd get out okay. Legend says that he's up in heaven, flying even higher, and having an even longer neck. I hope so for him. Soaring over to the bronze medal of greatness, we have Brightbill.
Brightbill? Processing.
This is one of the very few tier lists where being an adorable baby animal isn't enough to get you in the S tier on its own. Thankfully, Brightbill manages to stand out beyond just being cute, with Roz's first major task being to raise Brightbill to the point of being able to be with his own species. You find yourself rooting for the little guy to succeed, whether it's finding food, learning to swim and fly, or more importantly, discovering the importance of love and camaraderie. Brightbill also works perfectly as the emotional core of the movie. This gooseling is the one who causes Roz to surpass her own programming in that climactic rescue scene where the two finally exchange a mother-son "I love you" is just, it's beautiful, man. While he's only the runner-up for our list today, I have a feeling that Fink is going to be most people's top pick for this movie's ensemble cast. And frankly, I can't really blame them. Every Dreamworks movie needs a wisecracking bundle of sarcasm, and Fink fulfills that role perfectly.
You should work on that.
But his comic relief strengths don't take away from his own sense of heart. Throughout the movie, Fink is fleshed out as a guy who's never really understood what it means to love or be loved, until his unofficial adoption into Roz's family, that is. The process of both gaining and becoming a friend changes Fink for the better. He starts to stick up for others, like threatening the geese who bullied Brightbill, Walter White style. And despite his initial insistence that kindness is not a survival skill, through reluctantly helping Roz rescue the forest animals from the snowstorm, he gains the courage to tell them all, in no uncertain terms, "My bad." One of the most unpopular, untrustworthy guys in the whole forest was the one who finally convinced the local animal kingdom to come together and stick together.
Amazing.
And that makes it all the more powerful to see. Fink is definitely one of Dreamworks' greatest sidekicks to date. Truly, one of the few to rival the mighty Donkey. But finally, the gold medal of greatness has to go to none other than the main character, the wild robot herself, Roz. Honestly, there's just no way around it. This movie is chock full of memorable characters, but Roz is the very core of its message. Which is obvious, right? Of course the main character is the core of the movie, but with such a simple yet powerful story to tell, it takes a lot to still end up being the most memorable character in the movie as the protagonist. Roz, however, is a character who perfectly manages this, and it's all thanks to her being the perfect lens through which to view the movie. Think about it. We've talked already about how gorgeous this movie is. The adorable baby otters, the beautiful set pieces, that incredible butterfly scene. We're all seeing these things and being like, whoa. So what better character to be at the forefront of those sights than a robot who's literally just waking up and learning about the world around her?
Activating learning mode. Do you need assistance?
It identifies you with her right away, and that makes you root for her through everything. Whether it's sending Brightbill to an impromptu flight school, or fighting against Vantra and her legion of robot nukes. But all of that can only get a character so far. What really makes Roz special is the character arc she goes through. While she's already programmed to be altruistic to every living creature around her, the arc she goes through isn't about her learning to just be herself or something like that. That would be fine, I guess, but it hits all the harder for the only difference to be that instead of helping others because she has to, Roz now helps people because she wants to. It's honestly one of the most touching ways you could upgrade a character to a full-on hero. And Roz is definitely a protagonist we're majorly hyped to see more of, hopefully with some more butterflies too.